Hi, welcome to the channel where we provide an alternative view to the common narrative. Today is Wednesday. What day is today? Actually, the 5th of July, and it's our third episode of our new format. And today we'd like to talk about, France has experienced a number of protest actions, and it seems to me that, they call France is on fire. So, what can you tell us about the recent events that happened on the weekend?
Okay, so it's my third video, so let's see how it goes. So on June 2023, a young 17-year-old, well, he's not that young, but he's still underage, let's call it that. So on this day, his name is Nahal Merzouk. He's a French youth of Algerian descent, and he was shot and killed by the French police. So Nahal is alleged to have disobeyed several traffic offences, including endangering the lives of one pedestrian and one cyclist, and upon which he refused to turn off his ignition, and that's when the police officer shot at him, which resulted in him unfortunately passing away. Now, there's this, let's call it a narrative circulating that okay, so the conclusion that I draw is that the public, and there's a bunch of important figures and let's say celebrities, and including Macron, the Prime Minister of France, they are condemning the actions of the police officer, calling it unforgivable and inexcusable. So essentially, everyone is against the police officer. Now, if you read a bunch of articles and you listen to some videos and etc., you will find that there is a bunch of important facts not really discussed or mentioned, which really changes the image of what happened.
It should actually change their perspective of the
Yeah,
viewers. So,
yeah.
yeah.
So essentially, I do not know a lot about what happened, and understanding it from different perspectives. Well, not really different perspectives. Listening to different news outlets. Let's call it like that. I eventually felt like, okay, this was another incident where police unfairly shot another person, resulting in their death, and the public. So yeah, the French population or whatever rioted for the next few days, which was very intense. They burned down something like 1,350 vehicles. They injured 24 police officers, and there were over 3,000 arrests made. Now, it is alleged that the majority of these protesters were underage or just above legal age, so mostly teenagers and young adolescents. Now, some of the facts, I wrote them down in bullet points so I don't forget them. So, in 2017, a law was passed permitting police to shoot at vehicles who are fleeing from a traffic stop or resisting arrest. Now, this is not only in France, but Poland and where else?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, there are a few European countries, let's just say like that. And Nahal was, despite not having an official criminal record, he was very well known to the police for, okay, let's say resisting arrest, which happened the previous weekend actually. Driving without a license plate, driving without insurance, and selling drugs and using substances while behind the wheel. So this is something I did not know, which really changes my perspective of what happened. So it kind of feels like there's obviously now more to the story, and it wasn't just an obvious police rookie or whatever that killed a passenger or whatever due to negligence. This police officer was actually ranked a sergeant, which is pretty high up in the ranks. And yeah, so what happened the day of his shooting, he was driving a suspiciously expensive car for a 17-year-old with a Polish number plate. And he was speeding and then he ran a red light. So the two police officers on motorcycles indicated visually and audibly,
Yeah.
that he needs to stop and pull over because he's breaking, traffic laws. And he refused and even increased his speed more and basically fled from these motorcycles. And he was only forced to stop due to traffic congestion. And then he was pulled over, and as he was pulled over, the police approached his car, and they were armed. So this teenager was really aware of the seriousness of the situation. And as the police officers approached his car, he turned out and he tried to drive away, and he basically endangered, like I said, a pedestrian and a cyclist. And this to the police was unacceptable. And the police shot at him, not necessarily wanting to kill him, but he was, I think the police officer was in his right, according to the law. It's obviously very difficult to speak about this incident without, or looking at it factually, because there's a child, or I'm going to call him a child, that got, he died, and it's very unfortunate and it's very sad. But we are now only looking at the facts of what really happened, because essentially this police officer is now being trialed for attempted homicide, and we all know what happens to police officers when they get arrested and sent to jail. So essentially, the youth, or let's call him Niall. So he was essentially now he was now killed in the whole ordeal, and then the car drove into some, I think I understand it as a furniture shop or something. And so they attempted to not resurrect, but they offered him medical help and tried to save his life, and then he unfortunately passed away. And there were two other people in the car, which were then arrested. And that's basically what happened with the incident. And afterwards, for 5 days, there were riots that, people almost burned down Paris. So that's where that's how we came up with the heading. So now, hearing all these additional facts, how do you feel about the situation?
Well, firstly, we can have a look again at the video. But as you can see, the one police traffic officer is holding a gun pointed at the driver. Now, no sane person will drive away if a gun is pointed at you. So this was the driver knew precisely what he was doing. Because nobody would actually do it and drive away. And then, the biggest question is, what should the traffic cop have done?
Oh, this is something I forgot to mention, but the police officer or the traffic officer, or not justified, he mentioned afterwards in his report that Niall was, as he was speeding out, he was going to hit the officer. So in my opinion, I don't know how I would have responded differently. I mean, it's logical sense. It's a very stressful situation. If you think a car is going to hit you after committing all these traffic offenses, I mean...
Well, I don't fully agree with that. The video doesn't really show that that the traffic cop was in front of the car that would have yielded. But if the traffic was congested, then surely him chasing away, he would have bumped another car, put some pedestrians under life-threatening position, and then maybe killed them or one of them. So, it's not as innocent as it looks like. Firstly, I mean, the question has to be asked again. What was the traffic officer supposed to do? Here we have a criminal who is known to the police. The fact that he's 17 years doesn't make any difference. There are child criminals from young ages and so on. So the fact that he's 17 doesn't matter, not in my. And then he has an expensive car, which he's not supposed to have, according to his age group. He has violated traffic rules.
Oh, we should probably mention it was a MC or MG Mercedes, or it was a BMW, but it was top range. I mean, yeah, okay, sorry.
Well, you can't really see that from a video. But in any case, so what else should you do? I mean, here you have a criminal that has transgressed the law. So what the world now wants to see us is that, no, any criminal can drive away. Doesn't matter whether he's violated some laws or whether he's looked after or wanted by the police, and the police can basically do nothing. Now, if you allow that to happen, then you might as well scrap the police, because then you will allow anarchy to rule, and any criminal will do whatever he wants to do. So, I'm sorry, what else did the guy have to do? There's no other option. Secondly, he showed the gun clearly, so the guy knew precisely what he was doing. And then thirdly, it became an emotional issue, because, now the guy's Nihal, his name is Nihal, and he's a descendant or from Arabian or Algerian heritage and so on. And it's in a white country, and now it became a racist issue. If it was a normal white French person, there wouldn't have been the troubles. I mean, if you look at in America and so on, there we had this the killing of Floyd.
George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. And was that warranted? And he was a criminal, and the police tried to apprehend him. Yes, they did use excessive force. They didn't use a gun, but I think they smothered him.
Yeah, they kneeled on him for an excessive amount of time.
Now again, some people will think, how long do I have to kneel on somebody that he will die? I wouldn't think that I have to, that is a killing type of hold and so on. But again, he was a criminal, and but the population decided, no, this was an unlawful arrest. I don't agree with the policemen what they did, by the way, but still, it's a common thing that happens in America. I mean, how many people or innocent people are killed in America by the police? And most of them are actually white, but nobody cares about that. As soon as it was a black guy being killed, then there are riots and marches and I don't know what. And it's the same here. But the problem is that most of the protesters were young. And why were they young? I mean, they don't really understand the condition. They were probably instigated by mass hysteria or by social media, and from a legitimate type of action by a police officer, they decided, no, they don't agree with that. It was converted into an emotional thing, a racist thing, and then they exploited it, some of them, and they looted shops, they destroyed property. I mean, is all these things right? No.
Even the grandmother of the victim said that they are using her son's death to justify all their criminal behavior, stealing from, Apple and Louis Vuitton and everything. So, I agree.
So I don't have a really sympathy with this guy, Niall. He deserved what he got. I'm sorry about No, I'm sorry. He deserved. Well, if another person had done it, or he was a little bit older, nobody would have said anything about this. The fact that he's young, I don't care about that. The criminal is a criminal, doesn't matter what age you are. And if you don't listen to police, then you are begging for
nonsense.
Yeah, and you're begging actually for anarchy.
Yeah.
Because that is what the youth do. They are looking for anarchy and violence and law breaking, and then they exploit these things. Now, we talked about this before. I can understand France. France is a country that, regularly protests against certain actions. And you can probably find a protest every weekend in France itself, in various cities. And we had the Yellow Vest a couple of years back. And that went on for about more than 50 weeks. So that's more than a year every weekend.
That's a lot.
And then, even if you had only the Yellow Vests, there were a lot of other groups that joined them, protesting, say, LGBTQ, whatever, and other stuff as well.
Just
So one
find
would
something to
expect,
protest.
one can understand the people of France. But on the other side as well, the French police or the riot police, they are so fed up with their situation, they actually have problems of their own. I mean, they are underfunded, under-equipped, understaffed,
Unsupported.
unsupported by the government. You can see here rightly. I mean, their own government turns against them for bad image instead of supporting the officer for his actions. And then the politicians later ask the question, but why did my country go into anarchy
Fall
when the police
apart.
didn't want to action anymore? In fact, they went so far that the police actually said that they should be left alone and do their job and stop this.
Chokehold, basically.
No, interference by the politicians and exploitations of that. And I fully agree with him. And I also heard that a lot of the facilities were sort of in a bad condition. So now you must think about how frustrated those police are. In fact, actually, I watched a lot of videos, especially European videos, and I watched a couple of French ones. And I know a movie is a movie and a TV series is a TV series, but if you look past the story, then you can see the culture and the real life of that wherever this video was made. It's basically expression or representation of the culture of that nation where the video was made. And I saw there was one story about a normal police officer, and there was a riot going on, and then they suddenly had to dress up in their riot gear, and then this woman, simple woman, they had to stand in the front, and you can see the angry protesters, and you see the policewoman was afraid. She was actually very scared for what will happen. And in fact, one of the mates was injured in this confrontation, which was a normal type of protesting. So at the end of the day, it's the same thing. It's the riot police are just as scared as the rioters itself. And then how do you defend it? It's natural to defend yourself. And if you see some of the videos that were taken, I'm sorry, I'm supporting the police.
Well, 24 police officers, like I said, were injured. It's not a one-sided.
So if you start injuring police officers, then you are transgressing this question of your rights as to protest, because you become violent. You're going against law and order. And no country can afford that to do. I mean, some of those videos that I even saw, I saw some, then there were no-go zones, and we have heard about these no-go zones. I mean, those are like, I don't know how you call those areas in Europe and so on, but it's like these high flats that were basically buildings that were given to the poor. Most of them are immigrants and so on, who have no jobs, and then they sit there and there's a crime network going on there. But if the police wants to interfere or arrest anybody, then they are thrown by rocks and attacked by these residents. So on the one side, they moan they're not looking after them, the government is not looking after them, and there's a lot of crime. But when the police wants to action and arrest these guys, then the other guys are preventing them from doing the arrest. So it's like two contradictory stories. And at the one stage, these areas are then classified as no-go zones. Police are not allowed to go in that area, because if they go and they do their job, they are basically creating racist and creating
unsafe area.
Creating riots. And so on. I mean, there's even in Switzerland and Sweden and Norway, there are all these areas of no-go areas where basically foreigners have taken over your country. They are supposed to be glad that you are that you're giving them assistance and safe havens and all these other social grants like housing and food allowances and hospital, and then they do this.
To integrate with the population. They
but
demand.
But what can we say is that this integration in France is a lot more advanced than any other countries like Sweden and Norway and Germany and so on. because a lot of French immigrants came from French colonies, and the French allowed that to come to France. And in this case, I understand that Nahal was a fourth generation Algerian in France. But then you have to ask yourself the question, if you are the fourth generation, why are you still called an Algerian? Why are you not called a Frenchman?
Yeah.
Why do you make the distinction between a fourth generation Algerian instead of an immigrant Frenchman?
Yeah, that's actually good.
So you made it racist. So who's the racist then?
Yeah.
The guys that are actually producing it.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, that shouldn't have happened. That should have been a Frenchman and classified as a Frenchman. And this is no racial thing. And it's being exploited. And I cannot support this. For me, like I always say, put them against the wall and shoot them all.
Oh, God. I don't know if that's appropriate to say. But
I mean, the French have a huge problems. Europe, and what as France has done, because of their history, I mean, they are some of the most liberal thinking people. So they're not really racist in that respect. They have accommodated these people, and most of these immigrants speak French. And so they all understand it, and the French government basically has supported them in that respect. In say, countries like Germany, or in Sweden, or they don't integrate with the local population. They keep their language, they keep their religion, and basically they are foreigners in a guest country, and they're getting all the benefits to the detriment of the normal inhabitants and of that country. I mean, in Germany, those guys still speak Turkish or African languages. They are very bad with learning German speaking and integrating the society. So for me, that's a total of waste. And they shouldn't be there. They should be actually deported. But then sometimes, they are, the excuse is usually given, yes, we need cheap labor. So these guys are important and allowed to stay because we need people to work so that we can tax them, so they basically can keep the economy going and support all the old pensioners, because all of these countries are basically getting old and they're not getting children, so the population is growing. So these guys are supposed to now fill up that gap. But, I mean, come on, we're living in a new modern world where the buzzword is AI, and AI means automation. So if more products are automated manufactured, then who the hell needs low-skilled laborers? So again, I think it's contradictory to what they really profess to do. So if you look at a country like Sweden, one of the most liberal countries in the world, who is so-called the bastion of human rights and all the woke things that we have in today, who have also their no-go zones, and huge numbers of them, they allow an absolute expression of hate speech by allowing the burning of the Quran. Now, if you want to support this whole story about LGBTQ, what the hell?
yeah, that's actually well done.
and gender identification and all this other stuff, and you say those are human rights, then burning the Quran is something much more severe. It's like comparing a fist fight with a murder. To that extent, that's the difference between these things. And then, no, the Swedish government says, no, it's fine. Say they are allowed it. No, that is an expression of hate. Seriously hate speech. But then we have all these old peoples, and that's why we have these riots. And that's why they were allowed to do. And my sympathy goes with the police officers. They are living a hard time, and they have been living it for a long time now. Yes, I know they have mishandled some of the yellow vests and so on. The yellow vests had some valid disputes and so on. But again, one has to understand both sides of the coin.
That's my problem with the majority of the articles. They don't mention these important facts. They only mention, it feels like it's only one-sided. It's pushed to only be looked at from one side, which is quite...
Yeah, but it's always... it's like, when the French, Macron, Actually, I'm not that much against Macron. I did it in my previous video. He's one of the few European leaders that sometimes, well, given what he is and what he has said before and so on, he sometimes puts out his neck and his head and tries to stop this madness that's going on in terms of the conflict between the West and Russia and so on. But he gets no support and he pulls away. So at least he's one of the leaders that tries to do something. Well, ineffective. But we all know about the pension reform he had to do.
Was that in
Recently.
2005 or 9 or
Yeah,
2017?
but I'll talk about that.
Okay, okay.
The point here is that we had this financial crisis in 2008.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when we all crashed and so on. And instead of allowing the certain economies and companies to collapse and get a reset, they decided to ignore it and then pumped in money and then elevated or increased the final risk of a implosion and the size of it. But in that stage, a number of countries implemented an extra 2 years of pension. So the normal pension age is usually 65, which is also in South Africa like that, and they push it up to 67. But the French didn't do it. Now, let me see, that's 14, 16 years later, the French are forced to do it, forced to follow the other people, and now wants to increase the pension age. But as far as I understand is that the pension age for the French is 60 years, not even 65.
Yeah.
And they don't even work 40 hours a week like we all other do. They work, I think, 36 hours. So they're already on a very beneficial type of working schedule. And they wouldn't allow, well, nobody is prepared to work longer for pension, so one can understand why the population is against it. But it doesn't make the population right. And then Macron forced it through. He didn't get it to Parliament. He sort of made it on the basis of a so-called equivalent to the American executive order and pushed through the law. And that also created riots. And some of them were violent also. But the point here again is it still doesn't warrant the action of the people. I mean, the fact that they don't want to pay more doesn't mean that they have to, cannot pay more. I mean, if prices rise and there's no money, then you have to suck it up and tighten your belt and get going and understand the problems that the government has. So, in that respect, but then with this whole non-support for the police officer or the traffic officer during this case, then the respect goes down again. In any case. So, it was a little bit chaotic.
Yeah, definitely.
And I believe the people actually were unfair, unreasonable. There were a lot of people arrested.
Yeah, a lot.
And there are actually some people that are prosecuted and put into jail. I think they got 3 or 6 months or something like that. But then the jails there are not the same as our jails, are they? So life is a little bit more easier. Although in those videos when I saw, some of them are bad. But my sympathy with the police. They have a very tough job.
Yeah.
An ungrateful job. So if they do something good, then they don't get the recognition. But if they do bad, I mean, how can you are putting your life every day on the line and you're not appreciated by the population. And if you do something wrong, then you get the most severe punishment that you can get.
I wouldn't want to pursue that job.
I also don't want to be a police officer. Because that's a very difficult thing to do.
So that brings us to the end of today's story. Thank you for joining us. Please share, tell your friends, and subscribe. It really goes a long way. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Cheers. Until next time.